today by Eddie Rigg, Executive Chairman of Argonaut. Eddie, thanks for your time.
G'day David, how are you going?
Good.
Yeah.
Firstly, it's been a big year for Argonaut, a key transaction with the PCF acquisitions, but busy on a lot of fronts. What have been some of the highlights?
Yeah, no, thanks David. Look, it has been a big year for Argonaut. A lot of firms have had good years. We've seen through this year our clients, our corporate clients, become very well funded. We've been involved with companies making some very good discoveries and advancing those projects, such as De Grey. We've taken, first time in a number of years, new IPO. So we did the IPO of Next Gen in Australia, which is, we argue, would be the best undeveloped project of any commodity in the world, and that's a sort of $3 billion company. We also did the IPO of Global Lithium, which has been, I think, rated consistently in the top 5 or 6 IPOs globally. Really well put together company. And we also floated Medallion Metals, which we really have a belief in long-term future. So we haven't done an IPO of a new company for, I would say, 4 or 5 years, and we've done 3 this year. PCF was a really important thing for us. So we had some really different changes to the firm this year. PCF was a business run by Liam Twigger. It's a business we've known for a long time. I first thought about doing something with Liam back in 2015. Liam's business is really about selling assets. They have some very big clients, and they act for these big clients to sell assets. They also have a debt advisory business, and we have a debt advisory business, but quite fledgling, and we don't really sell assets for bigger companies. But for us, we saw that as balancing up our sort of revenue mix. Bringing the guys into the team as we did, we settled the transaction in September. I think we announced it in July. Has been a real win for us and a real win for Liam. His team's brought opportunities in with bigger clients. We're talking about the majors here, where we've now been able to say to them, well, hang on, do you want to take over something? And we can use our M&A skills versus our asset sales skills. So that's worked really well for us. They've introduced us to a new group of people. Plus, quite often they've been involved in selling assets, and the buyer then needs to raise money. They've gone to other firms to raise money. We've been able to work with those companies to raise money, so we're getting a bigger share of the wallet. They're also a really good bunch of people, and they've fitted in culturally exceptionally well. And for me personally, to have someone like Liam in the firm, I've sort of been driving this firm for a long time, and having a very senior person who have a lot of respect for, and he has a lot of respect in the marketplace. It's great. I mean, only a couple of days ago, I was being very angry, very, very angry in the office, and I had the guys on eggshells, and Liam said to me, Eddie, go home and kick your dog. And I thought to myself, well, not many people actually say that to me, and I took it, I realised, pulled my head in, went back in my office and settled down again. So having those guys come in, it's really interesting. Our income, the balance of our income across the firm is immediate. We're seeing now that where before we were a really capital raising focused firm, going forward now, that's not going to be the majority of the income. Will be very broadly spread. We also, this last year, we closed our Hong Kong office, and that was somewhat sad, but Hong Kong's not the same place it was when we opened up. So we were there for 10 years. I've got to say, even though we've closed the office and people say, oh, you closed the office, it hasn't worked, we believe we were net beneficiaries out of the 10 years up in Asia. The Chinese, we've built very good relationships. We've got Greg Southey's come back. He's really matured as a guy, and importantly, Greg's now taken over head of corporate finance, which is the real driver of Argonaut. And to have him come on the main board of the company and also be the head of the corporate finance, which is, as I said, the number one, it's the powerhouse of Argonaut, is great. So that's been some really good things which have happened over the last year. We just yesterday, we had our AGM and we had 17 of the 19 shareholders attend the AGM. Now that's never happens. And normally it's, I'm struggling to get a quorum to turn up to the AGM, but they all thought there was mostly going to be a big dividend, and they were right. So we did pay out and declare our largest ever individual dividend in the history of the firm, and we've been going for 20 years, and 20 years in March next year. And I've got to say, for me, that gives me an enormous amount of pride, the fact that we built a business. You started in March 2002, and come next March, we've been around for 20 years, and I say this, that's really important for the industry, the whole resource industry, that Argonaut exists. When we started the business, there was 12 members. We were the 12th member of ASX run out of Perth. Today, there's only Euroz, Hartleys and Argonaut left as members of ASX run and managed out of Perth. And of course, Euroz only started the year before us. So if you go back 21 years, not a single member of ASX still exists who was run and managed out of WA. And that's worrying for me. And it's important that Euroz, Hartleys and Argonaut maintain a solid presence in this state and continue to raise the money for the resource industry, because it's these juniors which become very make major discoveries. I mean, consistently we see now it's the smaller companies making these bigger discoveries and making these great discoveries, and then the bigger companies might come in and take them over. That's the natural evolution. So for us, really, 2021 has been a huge year.
You talk about capital raisings and you talk about juniors and their ability to go out and explore. This year's, and the last 2 years in particular, have been really unique in that the model has changed somewhat, where junior explorers would traditionally raise enough for a campaign, finish their campaign, hope to raise some more. This time round, they're actually getting the amount of funding they need to run campaigns over multiple years. What do you think that means from an exploration and an outcome point of view?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Good point. I mean, over the last year, and really since about April 2020, the ASX has become the leading exchange globally for capital raising for the resources space. It's absolutely monstered the TSX, London, Hong Kong. It's now the #1 exchange in the world for capital raisings. In fact, by number of capital raisings, it's 8 or 9 times the amount of capital raisings in Canada, but for volume of dollars, it's still massively more important in all those other exchanges. And to put it in perspective, it was only during this year that one point in time BHP's market cap was larger than the combined market cap of all companies on the TSX. Now that's just sort of unbelievable, right? That's changed now that iron ore prices have come off and gold's gone up, and Barrick and Newmont market caps have increased to where they are. But similarly, the simple reality is 2 companies on ASX is bigger than the whole TSX market. So that's why we're seeing this massive flow of money into Australian companies, and it's allowed companies to raise lots of money. And we see our clients well funded, and allows them to do systematic programs, not really director holes. They're doing a lot of discoveries now are blind, so they've got to do a lot of sites behind it. And De Grey's one of the great examples, and I think tonight or tomorrow night or whatever it is, they got the AMEC awards, and I'm hoping they get the AMEC Prospector of the Year award. I did nominate them, so hopefully they do get it. So, but I'm really, the science went into that discovery is enormous. The way they looked at Chalice, they looked at, hang on, what's going on here? This is different. Why is there a structure going that way, not the other way, where traditionally it's been like a certain trend? They went up there and explored it. So companies have got funding to pursue using proper science and following that proper science up and making good decisions. Of course, for people like us, raising money is our best business. But we're happy to see our clients. Argonaut takes our model is a bit different than a lot of the transactional-based firms, and this is a positive thing, is that we take almost the old English merchant banking approach, where we alignment. So we largely have shareholdings in a lot of our clients, like a Genesis or like a Develop or like a AIC Mines or like a De Grey. We actually have meaningful shareholdings, and we follow these guys through for multiple years. So, but well-funded companies do better drilling, better science, lead to more discoveries. So, and the other interesting thing is that they can also resist approaches from majors to take them over too early. So it's a really interesting outcome. I mean, a good example recently was Apollo, was taken over by Ramelius, and also Gold Road had a go at that as well. And I think they still had 35 or 36 million cash at bank, right? And they ended up getting a premium price because they didn't have to sell.
Lastly, commodities always move in cycles.
Yeah.
There's the boom, there's the bust. You can almost chart it, and people do. You've talked about the fact that we're entering a super cycle, something that is transformational, never been seen before. What's the reasoning behind that thinking that we're not going to see a boom-bust cycle. We're going to see a prolonged super cycle.
So, and I call it, a super cycle, elongated cycle. So I think there's two reasons. One is that we're going for a revolution in the way electricity is provided, right? So historically it was coal and carbon and basically fossil fuels. We're moving now to renewables and battery metals. And just that transition, it's all about reducing our carbon footprint. So decarbonisation is just going to be the biggest thing impacting business, I believe, in the next 20 to 30, 40 years. And for us, Argonaut's a really key focus growth area. But more focus that, so we're going to go through this transition, and you can't just go from coal-fired power stations and power generation to renewables and also to just general electric batteries, right, and EV batteries. So you've got the legacy issues of changing, plus the technology there's not quite there yet to allow it to efficiently compete with cheap coal or hydrocarbons for that matter. We do think one of the solutions with old world metal is uranium. We're seeing uranium coming back in vogue, and I think it's very clean. It will reduce down the carbon footprint. So that's one area. So we're going through a revolution in the transitioning of the power source. So that's one thing which we think is a sort of 2040 to 2050 type process, right? So that's going to continue on. So that's enormous drivers in that area. The other areas that we've gone through COVID. And what COVID's done is, you see it in the state, you get shortage of labour, shortage of skills, logistics problems, everything's more difficult to respond to. So it's causing a supply side dampening. The response from the supply side isn't as immediate as it has been historically because you just can't get the people, you can't get the skills, logistics. We also have this ESG drivers, which mean that to get a mine approved, and traditionally a mine was 5 to 8 years, and I think it's fair to say now, to make a discovery through to a mine, that period might be extended out to maybe 10 to 15 years, particularly in sensitive areas. We saw what happened with Rio Tinto and Gill and George, and what that means is that to get your approvals to mine something now, it's an enormous amount of work needs to go in, and I accept that, and I think people need to accept that. The other point is that a lot of the discoveries now, or a lot of the ore bodies now, the easy discoveries are being made. So we're doing blind discoveries. And so that takes a lot more time, a lot more money to do. And the last one I say, and this is really important, and it's the reason why people love WA, we have enormous great sovereignty. So the political risk associated with owning an asset in WA is very low. Globally though, in many developed countries, when you've got a project from discovery to production, we're talking 8 to 15 years. They might have 3 different governments in that period of time. You don't know who's going to control the asset. So the sovereign risk now is enormous globally. And there's also this pushback, nationalisation sweeping through the world where they don't like the Western companies coming in there and building and exploiting their resources. So I think sovereign risk is a big issue for developing countries. It's even an issue in actually developed countries such as Canada, which have gone very anti-certain areas of development. So for us, we think there's been an elongated process because of COVID or the challenge with COVID. The approvals processes globally, the ESG challenges are things which are going to slow approvals down. The blind discoveries, the fact that these ore bodies are deep and the sovereign risk. And then we overlay that with the absolute transition of electrification from fossil fuels through to renewables and EVs.
A proud West Australian, chairing a proud West Australian company, 20 years of delivering for resources companies and resource services companies and watching them grow from small companies through to multi-billion-dollar companies. Exciting times ahead, no doubt, for Argonaut and its shareholders and staff. Eddie, thanks for your time.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.